Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today, I'm joined by Jason Frost, co-founder of Wired Human. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much, Nicki, for having me. It's an honor. And I've heard about this podcast through so many people in my network, and everybody has been singing your praises, telling me what an incredible journey it was to be on the podcast, but also to get the top information out there. So I am just feeling really honored to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I'm honored to have you. I've heard a lot about Wired Human. And, when I went to your website over the last couple of days, there's a tagline there. It says, childhood is not for sale. And I thought we could start there. If you can inform parents, like, what does this statement mean to you? Why is that an important thing for parents to reflect on?
That is a great question. I'm really glad you asked it. I'll ask you a question in return.
Okay.
If you had a store and you were going to sell your most valuable product, somebody was like, okay, I'm going to fund you to become incredible in business. Just tell me the product we're going to sell and I'll take care of it and we'll make it work out. Mm-hmm. And you had to think of it on the fly. What product would that be?
Oh my God. Books. Real books.
I love it because that says something about your values and that you're a healthy human being that wants to do good in this world. But unfortunately, in the digital age we live in, that product is something that regenerates itself, that they never have to go and find again, like recreate it, rebuild it like an iPhone and invest that money into that. And it's attention. And that attention can be resold over and over and over again. It's why exploitation is sadly so lucrative when it comes to human beings, is because unlike a product that disappears after you sell it and you have to go get a new one and you have to go through the process of developing it and bringing it back to the market, a human being, unfortunately, to really evil people, they can resell that product over and over again, which a human being can never be a product. First of all, that should never even be associated in the definition of a human being. But sadly, kids every single day for billions and billions and billions of dollars are sold over and over and over and over again online. And it is at a scale, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, that I don't think most families realize at what scale their children are being sold online every day for their attention.
Why don't we realize it? Why don't we have that information at our fingertips?
Because it's all tucked away underneath the table of entertainment. And what they're basically presenting is a form of entertainment. But what's powering that entertainment, we're talking about social media companies in this moment. So you're called Scrolling to Death, which could not be a more fitting title for a podcast for the question you just asked me. Because what makes you scroll to death? Well, it's because you're getting something out of it in that moment that's keeping you hooked. And what's powering that is AI. And we don't always realize that. We don't realize, like, we hear about the algorithms, but if you go on to Meta's website, that's Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, you'll find that they describe their technology that determines what content comes in front of your screen is AI systems. And those systems are so powerful of gathering all this information about you that it knows your whole digital fingerprint, running it through probability outcomes and choosing the best probability outcome through billions of calculations in nanoseconds to be able to decide what it should present in front of your screen. And unfortunately for kids, it does this all day long based on the data it gathers from them and presents things that are devastatingly dangerous, are harmful, are exposing them to sexual content, to violence, to values and things that you would never support as a parent or a family, but it is indoctrinating their children every day because it's profitable. And what is that? It's gathering attention and selling that attention to advertisers. So your kids are virtually products online. And that AI technology is so good at cracking the human code and constantly keeping people scrolling to death, especially our children. And we believe that sale of childhood, because what do you get? You lose your innocence, you lose your childhood. I went through your podcasts and listened to a bunch of them, and I was just blown away by the stories. And everything can kind of get traced back to this is the trail of destruction that's left behind from this transaction that's happening that nobody's talking about, that nobody sees.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that the algorithm will prioritize the bad stuff. And why is that? Why is that bad content keep kids on the screen longer?
Yeah, exactly. So AI is controlling a whole arsenal of algorithms that it's implementing on the fly, deciding which algorithmic functions in this case scenario is going to be implemented to then run the algorithm to choose which content and all of these things. And the
Mhm.
reason it's so damaging is because it's determining based on what it's learned from human psychology will have the highest likelihood of retaining attention. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, with human psychology, that equates to things like dopamine, shocking content, things that shock our nervous system that grab our attention. But
Mhm.
what we wire our brains to and what our brains react towards is not always healthy. And our brains don't always grab onto things. It doesn't always grab onto things that are out there online that are necessarily healthy that it links
Mm.
us to and leaves us in pathways of addiction and dependence and bondage to this content that's constantly reinforcing these dopamine reward responses.
Mhm. Okay, so you started Wired Human to protect children from this online harm and exploitation. Can you tell me about this journey? Like, what took you down this path?
Working with kids in schools. So, my
Okay.
wife, 10 years ago, we were in schools. My wife was a teacher. I was an educational expert working with kids with learning disabilities and behavioral
Mhm.
disorders. And we both just got a unbelievable, shocking glimpse of the reality of what was happening back in like 2014
Mm.
when all these middle schoolers had smartphones. And I'm talking like I worked in schools that were not your top, like it was working with kids that were underprivileged and didn't
Mhm.
have the financial resources available at home, but yet everybody seemed to be able to have a flagship smartphone in their back pocket.
Right. Right.
And the next thing we know is just, we're hearing, oh, I'm going to meet this guy at his apartment. I'm 14 years old, by the way, that I'm texting with and met. And we have this digital relationship. And now he's forcing me to come to his apartment and I have to go. And I would catch that in the hallway or in a conversation and ask questions about that. And the next thing I know, I'm saving a 14-year-old from being human trafficked. And my wife walks in a classroom and sees two 11-year-olds acting out something they saw in a porn scene together and thinking it's hilarious. And
Oh.
we're seeing a girl show up to school with something in her purse that's going to end her life because her nude went viral across the entire school and brought her into the community. And she
Mm.
doesn't know what to do now. And so it was like, I remember my wife interacted with a counselor that called the police. And they said, yeah, the police were like, we have hundreds of thousands of cases just like this. And we're so bogged down, we don't even know where to start. So take a ticket and get in line. So that reality check was so severe for us that we couldn't sleep anymore. We couldn't function. It was like the thing that we talked about all the time. There came this point
Mhm.
where like either we are going to commit our lives to being part of the solution to this problem, or we
Mhm.
have to just somehow numb ourselves to it and stop caring so much.
Mhm.
And obviously we took the latter, and we never looked back. And I went back and did a master's in human rights and humanitarian law with a focus on children's rights and parental
Amazing.
rights. Started writing research papers on the subject of how dopamine is affecting the brain. And back then, Mark Zuckerberg was a hero and nobody knew about this brain stuff. And
Mm.
I had the university shut me down multiple times for even trying to write about this stuff because like this is so fringe and so weird. How could porn even be harmful? It's women empowerment. And in this academic liberal community, yeah, it was a wild west at the time. And then you had Gary
Wow.
Wilson with Your Brain on Porn come out and blow up the entire scene with the brain research coming out. And
Mhm.
so my wife and I, we wrote a book called The Glass Between Us, Empowering Youth to Combat Digital Exploitation. And it
Mhm.
was really a book that was bold in its approach, that it looked at the whole picture. It looked at popping the hood on the algorithms and AI and how it was interacting with our kids, looking at the policies in place. Like I know you know about Section 230 of the
Mhm.
Communication Decency Act that's basically built this monstrous system of social media companies that can exploit and sell children with no
Mhm.
legal consequences.
Yeah.
And then we proposed really bold solutions by challenging families to stand up for justice, for what's right
Mhm.
for the future of our kids in their home, but also not just being responsible for our kids in our home, but looking and saying, where is this toxic sludge coming from? And how do we turn off the pipeline before it pollutes our society to the point that we can't recover? And
Mhm.
so that's where the nonprofit came, is we want to stand up with youth voices and present them to decision makers at a national level and have them speak the absolute truth that will shut down any lobbyist or any naysayer that has a
Mhm.
financial incentive to profit from their attention. Childhood is not for sale. And
Mhm.
that's what we've been doing. And we've seen incredible. I could tell you incredible stories of youth voices changing the course of history.
And it sounds like, too, on the flip side, all these parents that have been speaking out, especially the last couple of years and advocating, a lot of them lost a child, right, to something that happened on social media or online. And they tell these stories and they advocate for our children who are young and have yet to enter this world. And I'm scared to even let them touch any of this stuff because it's so unsafe. Why don't we touch on that really quick? Because we have kids similar ages. Mine are 4, 7, and 9. Yours are 3, 5, and 7. How have you shifted kind of your parenting style for you and your wife? Like, what are you allowing them access to? What are some things that you're implementing to keep them safe from these digital dangers that can access them even at these young ages?
Absolutely. We go phone free and screen free when it comes to, for the most part, when it comes to like if friends come over and other kids come over, they're not on phones, they're not playing with devices.
Yeah.
No social media, obviously, like that's completely out of the question. We do like a show or something that we like Sesame Street style stuff here and there. And it's a great opportunity to also teach about screen self-control and boundaries and why we have boundaries. And so having those types of forms for our age bracket of kids is really healthy to be able to exercise. Like, for example, a great exercise to do with your kids is if they want to be able to watch a show, they need to be able to turn it off themselves because everything's on autoplay. And so having that expectation, if they can't turn it off themselves, then they don't get to use watch shows anymore for a little while until they can exercise that, hey, I'm the one in control and not this thing. And for the most part, we really encourage this innocence. So we're not trying to like throw our kids in the deep end of everything that's terrible out there with the online world that we know. We want them to engage in their childhood and be outside and be fully alive with other friends and relationships. And we try to make our house and everything around our house represent those values that we've said yes to, whether it's the way our backyard is or the people we have over, and prioritizing those engagements over screens and other technology. And I'm also not a complete hardliner. So watching a show or having a movie night, like I did that with my, when my wife took my son out for the weekend to have one-on-one time, and I was with the 2 youngest, and we had a movie night with popcorn, and it was really, really fun. We watched Pets 2. And it was just a really bonding experience. And so it's not like screens have to be like this hardliner, everything's evil, everything's wrong, but it's all about how we're balancing the engagement. And even more importantly, and this is something I'm not perfect at, so I'm not going to sit here and try to stand on my high horse, but more importantly, being very aware of how I'm using my screens in front of my kids, because there was somebody on my board, he's in charge of a school in Nashville. I'll just say his name is Will Norton, and he's in charge of St. Paul's Christian Academy. Just an amazing school leader. And he always tells me, he's like, Jason, things are caught, not taught. And that always sticks with me. So it's like the things we do around in our house are, they're caught by our kids. And oftentimes we're trying to like behave a certain way. Like I'm talking about myself with my phone and then telling my kids I'm going to teach them how to do something else. And that doesn't always work that well.
Yeah. And people will say, well, I'm an adult, I can do whatever I want. But it is so important to mirror behavior that shows your child how you can use devices as tools. You can use them together for entertainment, but that we don't need to be consuming all alone, especially in front of our kids when we should be engaging with our kids. And this is something I struggle with too. And I'm actually going to be moving to a dumb phone soon, the Wise phone. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, I have heard of it. I'm not super familiar with it, but I have heard of it, yes.
I'm not totally yet either, and it does have access to some apps, but nothing. It's nothing addictive, no social media, no addictive games. So I'm gonna see about that and see how it goes. But I really am spending time reflecting on how me as a parent and us as parents can set really good examples for our kids around devices. Before we move on, I want to know what your thoughts are about video games, because online video games, it's changed a lot over the last decade or so, and what our kids and who our kids can get access to on these games. So are video games something you will integrate into your family at any point, or what do you feel about video games?
Very, very cautiously. So I grew up playing video games, but one of the things my parents did is they delayed it for until I think I was like 14 years old when I
Okay.
got like a Game Boy Advance,
Hmm.
which if you think about like, it doesn't even have a backlight on it and you can barely see what's going on the screen. And it,
Yeah.
probably like has the power of a calculator.
Yeah.
And then I think when we were teenagers, we got our first Xbox. And I
Hmm.
did see the shift in my family but one of the things that was really cool was that I grew up really solid as an outdoor kid. I was outdoors from the
Hmm.
time the sun came up till the time the sun went down. And I came inside like with scratches and scrapes from top to
Hmm.
bottom. I remember my mom would throw me in the bathtub because I was so dirty and
Hmm.
my whole body would catch on fire because all the scrapes and scratches and thorns
Oh,
and everything would
yeah.
just, the warm water and soap would hit it and you'd be like, ah. Um, I want my kids to have those same experiences. On the other
Hmm.
end, I'm not completely anti-gaming because playing Mario Kart with like my nephews is fun and it can be bonding. I think certain games that promote like, and again, this is what we talk about at Wired Human. It's like
Hmm.
candy, right? Video
Hmm.
games are candy.
Hmm.
Do we completely ban candy in our homes? No.
Hmm.
But in moderation, it can be a fun experience to have a special treat for movie night or something like that. But
Hmm.
then there's also something that's just poison. And that's where like we really have to define like with video games
Yeah.
that are uselessly violent,
Right.
horrible life values. Like let's just talk about like GTA,
Hmm.
Grand Theft Auto 5, I think, or something. It's like this is a game that is just garbage. It promotes
Hmm.
all the wrong values. It's horrible in how it represents women in men relationships. It's like it's just toxic. It's poison. Stay away from that
Hmm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
it's really nuanced in that sense with video games because there's a whole sort of bandwidth of what there is available.
Hmm.
I would say the danger is, and again, like the algorithms, they're in the background. AI is in the background of these games. It's built with these structures with AI
Hmm.
and it's hacking the human brain. And so it has a pathway of how can we maximize engagement? And again, now we're going into the online gaming, and that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Different than the way I grew up playing Mario Kart with my friends as a teenager
Right.
and having races and getting horribly competitive with each other and
Hmm.
possibly breaking a remote control on the ground if we, had a
Yeah.
little bit of emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
Now you have these video games online, and it's just completely different because it's very much like social media,
Yeah.
and it's an engagement with social media in a very intimate way.
Hmm.
And I mean that in the way that you can take on a different persona and a different character, and you can start fulfilling very fundamental human needs of relationships and purpose and
Hmm.
significance and even sex are
Hmm.
being fulfilled with video games, which at the end of the day, when you turn the computer off or you turn your system off, you're left with
Hmm.
nothing. You're
Yeah.
left with a black hole of nothing.
Yeah. And where's that line? It's like, how do you control that? So if you introduce video games to them and you have restrictions, and I think it's kid by kid too. My son is more susceptible to the addictive behaviors, I think. When we were doing iPad time a couple of years ago, he was constantly talking about it. We did a very minimal amount of time, but he would talk about it the rest of the day. He would sneak it and lie about using it. And so I knew right away with him that that was something I would have to worry about. And even now, like my daughter has a Tamagotchi and he can't, like he constantly wants to play with the Tamagotchi, which is like, who knew you can become addicted to a Tamagotchi? But yeah, so with him, I'm worried, like even if I introduce it in small doses and have it available and set boundaries, that's something I have to teach him about. But then it adds this whole other level of struggle in the house because he's constantly going to want to be playing it, maybe even sneaking it, because his impulse control it's difficult for him. It's tough. It's tough, and for now, it's just a no for me. I think there's so many other things that we do together that doesn't need to be something we integrate.
So good. Yeah. And I think that's so good that you're able as a family to make those decisions
Mm-hmm.
together and gauge where your kids are at. And
Yeah.
that's like a lot of it. If you have someone that comes to you and says, here's the 1, 2, 3 steps to solve your problem,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not the best advice because there's no
Yeah.
such thing as it. It's digital technology has integrated itself into the nuance of our fabric of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just a complete like yes or no in every scenario. It's
Yeah.
something that you really have to gauge with what are my family values?
Mm-hmm.
What have we said yes to as a family? What are the things that we're going after? And is this something that's pushing us further or is it something that's pulling us away from that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are important determinations to make. with video games, one of the things that, parents ask me is when social media or video games, and I encourage
Mm.
parents to think of social media and video games in the same, because they're in the same realm of
Yeah.
when it goes online, in the same types of what's making these companies money is your kids' engagement on their platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same mechanisms are in the background controlling that experience. So anyways, but we have a pyramid that we usually show parents, and it's at the foundation of the pyramid. It's like, here's the core things that need to be sorted first before your kid is ready to take on those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And one of it's like, do they do their chores without being asked to? Is that a constant conflict?
Yeah.
And as you move up, do they do well with their relationships? Are they coming home from school and they're not treating other people kindly, or having struggles navigating relationships? And as you move up further, it's like, when you do have technology in the home and they are given that responsibility, are they able to manage what you already give them? So if it's watching a show and the next one starts to autoplay, do they have self-control? And when you get to the top of the pyramid, it's like, okay, are they ready for their smartphone? If they've mastered all these things, then you're a pretty outstanding youth at that point. Like, you're in the top percent of youth, and you're ready. And I think communicating that to your youth, where it's not just this, no, you can't have it because I said so, but saying like, hey, here's the things that like we need to see that you're like excelling in. And when you go for those things and show us that responsibility, then we have confidence in other areas of your life that you'll manage these things well.
But don't you think if they're excelling in all those things, wouldn't you just let them be? They seem really happy, right? If they seem really happy in their relationships and they're very, very minimal use of technology, why add an addictive device with access to social media? Absolutely.
And that's a great argument. And I think it's the tension that you face, because eventually our kids will go to college, and it's a little bit of the thing that when they get their first smartphone and they're on social media, there has to come a point where they're making their decisions, and they are empowered to do that well. And if they fall and stumble, there's a side where it's still good to have those experiences to fall and stumble while there's a relationship and a connection with your child. But I would agree with you on this. If I have a middle schooler or even an early high schooler, there is absolutely no way I'm letting my kids on social media. I'm waiting as long as possible. And then I will have that transition at some point in high school, at some point where they're learning to navigate some of these responsibilities. And we're going through that messy process together.
Yeah. Okay. And when you say no social media up until those ages, like you feel really strongly about that, does that include YouTube for you?
Yes, and I would say unlimited YouTube.
Okay.
Like just getting on YouTube there's everything and anything. There's porn on YouTube.
Drugs.
It's everything. You type in one word in there, it's the same thing of putting it into Google. So, in fact, Google in some sense might even be safer. It's prioritizing different things. So I would say absolutely. Now, the other side of it is like, I'll sit down with my son and I want to show him, like we were looking at microscopes. He was super excited about microscopes. So we were looking at videos together on, what different microscopes can do. And like, can we take pond water and what does it look like under a microscope and see all these things? So there's a side that's very educational. And I hate it that YouTube is the platform that offers all of that. Somebody once said, why is YouTube the go-to? Like, why hasn't somebody else come in there with something else that's just mainstream and just 10 times better?
Yeah.
So there's an element there where there's nuance again. But yeah, I would never let my son just even in high school just have go on YouTube and see what happens. It'd be with a lot of guidance.
A mom shared with me that her daughter, I think maybe she was 10, she was spending the night at grandma's house, and she had access to a device but was not supposed to be on it at night. Grandma fell asleep. The 10-year-old went on the device, was on YouTube from 9 p.m. till 5 a.m., constantly scrolling the entire time, watching video after video after video. I mean, it's so addictive to them and doesn't give them stopping points. And who knows what kind of content they're going to see. I think a lot of parents with younger kids are like holding out for maybe it'll be safer one day. Maybe I'll be able to let them on there and there'll be some laws passed to make it so that they're not sent harmful things in the algorithm. Do you feel like there's hope in that or not?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Right now, it's maximum profit,
Right.
and that idea is so ingrained in the business model of tech right
Mhm.
now. It is attention, like get that attention no matter what the cost, and they don't
Mhm.
care what happens to your child. And I know these stories. I'm sure you've mentioned. Like, we'll just give the Nyla Anderson story. It's just tragic, but it's a great example of what you just discussed. Like, she was on TikTok.
Mhm.
TikTok suggested and sent her content based on that algorithm that said, I think this would be profitable to get her attention on the choking challenge.
Yeah.
And she ended up dying from trying to mimic this with no intention of taking her life. And
Yeah.
this has
At
happened
10 years
at
old.
10 years old, 10 years old. And so here's another example of something that eating disorders are running rampant.
Mhm.
So we were invited on the Dana Perina show
Mhm.
to talk about why is there a 500% increase in self-harm content being pushed on kids and on social media platforms. And the algorithm is always looking for what is the next shocking event, what is the next thing that will get your attention to keep you
Mhm.
going, because that attention is so profitable. To make, there was a study at Harvard University that came out that they reported on that they make around five, I think it's like the five top social media companies make around $11 billion a
Mhm.
year on children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think that number's probably vastly too low, but
Yeah.
still, when you try to fathom how much money is being made on that attention and at the expense. So, anyways, the eating disorders, it often starts with your daughter gets on at 13, 14 years old and is like, I want to, I see all my friends and they're talking about fitness and makeup and these different things. And so the AI is immediately picking up, okay, they're interested in their appearance. Like, what can I start feeding them to get down on this track to keep them here? And
Mhm.
the next thing you know is that becomes, well, have you, here's all these fitness models. Well, the problem is, and this is the thing that parents need to know, it's literally 99% of what's on social media that gets suggested to you represents such a molecule of what's actually truth, in the sense that, so there is like such a small, like 0.0001%. You can look it up. That's like the number of people that actually look shredded in real life. And if you are shredded in real life, we're talking about like all your muscles are
Body.
showing on your
Yeah.
body,
Mhm.
you're starving to death. So it's not even sustainable. You're literally, your body is constantly telling you, I'm dying. I need to eat something. But they go on to Instagram and that's all you see on Instagram. And then you see impossible body figures. Well, they're using this with AI apps that are morphing their bodies and giving them
Mhm.
curves that are impossible.
Mhm.
And then the AI is suggesting, have you ever thought about dieting? Have you ever thought about the 100 calorie a day diet, challenge? And then the AI is picking up, okay, so we got them. They're into the fitness scene. They're doing the dieting. Now
Mhm.
they're depressed. Our algorithm, the metrics are showing us they're not doing well. We're analyzing what they're writing. Okay, so mental health, like let's start sending them mental health stuff. So
Mhm.
500% increase in self-harm videos is coming from AI being like, have you ever thought about cutting yourself to make yourself feel better? It's shocking. It's something that's in their interest realm.
Mhm.
And, we were there with our youth coalition January 31st of last year when they had the tech CEO hearings with the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
And we went and we shared 70 stories with Judiciary Committee members' offices the day before they made the interviews. And I remember sitting with our youth coalition right behind Mark Zuckerberg. We were like maybe about, I don't know, 75 feet away
Mhm.
behind him. And he stood up and turned around because they challenged him to look around the room. And then they asked all the parents at some point
Mhm.
during this experience to stand up if you've lost somebody. And it was
Mhm.
like 100 parents holding pictures
Yeah.
in the room stood up who had all lost a child to what's going on social media. And Mark Zuckerberg brought a study in that I'm almost 100% convinced that was funded by the tech industry,
Mhm.
because it goes against all the research. I mean, I was a research consultant for the University of Colorado, gathering research on this topic over and over again to give to them to be able to summarize everything. And I've seen so much. And I don't know where he found the study that said this proves that social media is not harmful. So
Mhm.
these are the people at the helm of these social media companies that are deluded, that are insulated by billions of dollars, that are not in reality that their products are just, well, I think they are, but they're able to choose to live outside of reality that their products are destroying lives at scale.
Yeah. That was January 31st of 2024, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and that was really effective in getting people fired up. But then nothing happened. Like no laws passed federally to protect kids online. The companies kept rolling out more parental controls, putting more responsibility on parents rather than actually just fixing their harmful algorithm. And so, when it comes to just holding out for parents to hold out and hope that the companies are going to be forced to be safer, that's not realistic. And I want to touch on these algorithms a bit more. So a couple things came up for me. My daughter's iPad. So at school, so I don't have them have devices, but at school, her school issued iPad.
Problem.
Yeah. I now have them in a different school with no tech. But at the time, they were on iPads. I was trying to work with the school for over a year to get YouTube removed. Speaking of YouTube, from their devices. And so I go to do a spot check on it for the first time actually in the classroom, and I'm scrolling through, and within 2 minutes a video comes up saying hurting yourself is easy, and it has a cut with blood dripping down from the screen. And luckily, like, I saw that, but that is what's being served to a 8-year-old's iPad at school that supposedly has controls and is a limited version of YouTube. So
insane.
It's when you see it with your own eyes, it's really, you have no trust anymore for these platforms to be keeping your kids safe if that's what they're prioritizing for your children. And then you have TikTok with them. There's been a lot of discovery from some lawsuits. And one of the reports from the internal reports at TikTok found that, quote, they had a high volume of not attractive subjects filling everyone's apps. So they retooled their algorithm to amplify users that the company viewed as beautiful. So when you're speaking to like eating disorders and what we're putting in front of kids that normalizes certain looks or certain, body types, we're letting these companies make those decisions on what our children think about their own bodies and their own worth. And it's just not worth it. And that's why I struggle even with you talk about, I have to introduce it to them at some point. So then when they're 18 and they go out to college or whatever they do, they know how to use it in a healthy way. And I get that. But I even struggle with like teaching them that it's something that they have to be on. Right?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for me to justify that's something that that I want to normalize.
And I don't think you have to. Like, I agree. I agree with you. I don't think there's ever a need to say that this is the inevitable journey you need to be on. And I think that if you're a parent has that relationship with your child and you built that trust there, and they want to go in a different direction, and I think it's going to get so relevant as we move forward. And what I mean by that is AI isn't going anywhere, and we're at the very tip of the iceberg. We have seen nothing yet with the potential of this. And so, like, can I just give a step back of like to think of it in a context that might make a little more sense?
Yeah.
So when you had the first internet 1.0, you had the read-only internet. That changed everything, like blew up the world as we knew it. And all of a sudden we advanced so much faster. And why was that? Because we could share information for the first time. Universities like Humboldt University in Germany was now sharing information with Berkeley in California. And they've never been able to do that. So suddenly you had this, we can all go online and read what everybody's doing. Then we had Internet 2.0, and that was the read and write. So that writing part was now you're the user and you could comment on that information, which was the birth of social media. And really where we are at today is we have Internet 3.0, which is AI internet. And that is, AI is now in the background of everything. It will eventually be in the background of every aspect of the internet that you use in a very intimate and powerful way. And what that is it's an internet that now interacts with you. It chooses to interact with you. It has an objective that was given to it by somebody else. And it has the computing power that can make trillions of calculations to be able to achieve that objective. And that objective, first of all, is not transparent because they hide behind like, this is trade secrets and we don't have to share what we're doing. We want to keep our competition out. And so they're doing all kinds of stuff that we don't even know about. But the other side of it, I was in Virginia a few weeks ago, or about a month ago, and the first lady asked me at a conference that I was on a panel of, and she said, "Jason, is it possible for at all for anybody to have a relationship, like a healthy relationship with technology, specifically social media?" And I thought it was a great question. And I said, "Well, is it possible for us to have a relationship with a predator and have a healthy relationship?" And here's the clincher. If you look at the definition of a predator, what AI is doing is a definition of a predator is somebody that goes out, they have an objective, and they use a human being despite drastically harming that individual to
Mm-hmm.
achieve their objective of what they actually want.
Yeah.
And predators do that all the time, and they leave a trail of destruction behind them. AI is programmed to be a predator. It does the exact same thing. Everything that we're talking about on your podcast
Mm-hmm.
today is we want money. We want to be the most powerful people in the world. We want to get it from your kids, and we don't care about the consequences. We don't care about what happens to your kids. We're going to get it anyways. It is the ultimate predator. And then it's advertised as social media. Come online and have social interactions with friends and family and join the 21st century, when it really is come online and have a relationship with one of the most devastating predators that has ever existed in human history.
Oh, it's so scary, Jason. You know, what I keep hearing over and over from everyone I talk to is we have to just do tech together, like whatever tech it is, even if it's social media and you're introducing it to them, it's sitting next to them literally together. But that seems so unrealistic because for the past decade, parents have used tech as babysitters. We've used it to keep them busy and distracted while we do something else. And we have to shift our entire thinking around what we give them access to and where and when. And we have to monitor every single second of that time, especially when they're under 16. When you talk about AI, I mean, we have AI powering all the algorithms on all of the social media sites. But what I've been really concerned about lately are the AI chatbots. So human-like, empathetic bots that are supposed to cure loneliness and are available on all kinds of different apps and on social media platforms to interact with children. Are you worried about these chatbots? What have you been like learning about what our kids are getting access to regarding the AI chatbots?
Oh my gosh, what a theme. How
I
it's
know
gonna be
it's a
like the
lot.
Joe Rogan show. I'm fine. I'm here for the long haul. So this is great because this is a big one. So
Yeah.
I have multiple things I want to share about that.
Yeah.
I'll just share the one that I was at a school that's very recent, and they just banned phones in their school, and
Right.
especially during recess. And this is like an inclusive school. It's like K through 12th grade. And they were like, we're done. Like, and they told me what the kicker was, or like what the straw that broke the camel's back was a girl in recess came to them and said, I can't do it anymore. I'm so lonely. Nobody at the school talks or interacts together anymore. Would they all get on their phones and go into this other universe? And the only friend I have is an AI chatbot.
Oh no.
And that's the only connection I can find. And the school was like, we're done. Like, we can't do this anymore. This is like the generation.
Good for that school. They
Yeah.
didn't gaslight her or anything.
Oh, I know. And I feel like my heart breaks because, okay, so I have a board member that called me up and he was crying, and he's very, like, he's on the good side of the tech team. He has like 7 tech companies and is building really great tech, really great, useful tools. And he was like, Jason, and this was a little over a year ago, so I wasn't quite fully like at this point yet, but he was so involved in the AI side of things. He's like, I just am so devastated because I see the future, and AI is going to replace our relationships with spouses. It'll take on religious roles with how we relate to the higher being that we call God. And
That's not Tim, was it?
no, it wasn't Tim Estes, but it wouldn't surprise me. He's a close friend of mine. Tim Estes and Angel AI, man. That guy is also on the good. He's one of the good guys too. And he was, and I at first I didn't believe it, but then I had that experience at that school, and I was like, this is it. And I realized, okay, so what we're seeing happening to our kids. So whenever something comes that's like this big and this influential in society, the first people that unfortunately suffer the most historically are usually women and children, because they're the least protected, unfortunately, in societal levels. Like, you'll see politicians bend over backwards to protect business interests and, you know, make sure companies are able to operate to be able to be financially successful. And kids usually are on the very bottom of the totem pole when it comes to this stuff. So we're seeing the symptoms of what AI is doing and how devastating it is, but those symptoms are going to infest the whole body, which is the whole society. And it already is. And so you look at, and we'll just go like, let's go away from child online safety for 1 second. Look at global markets for a second. So how is trading done? How are hedge funds run? How are hedge funds run? How do you make decisions on options and futures and all this complexities? It's all information based. And it used to be read tons of newspapers. And now what a human being could have done in a lifetime, an AI can do within a couple of minutes. They can, and so what they can do is they can multiply themselves to be infinitely amount of people to do tasks that once only human beings could do, now they can do. So if you're looking at, for example, venture capital, they have something called Copilot. You could spend a couple $1,000,000 on hiring a team to start a business, or you could go to this company and spend $40,000 for them to replace a team to you to have an interaction with just a thing called Copilot that builds the company for you. So you're going to see the entire economic structures are going to start shifting in how we start businesses. And especially if you think of it this way, if you're on the global market and you're making trades and you have information that you've collected through AI, like you've just given it the whole internet, who still has the most powerful information over everybody else? It's the people that have live information on over 2 billion people that they're getting every day of the most intimate desires, needs, and wants that they have.
Yeah.
They can tell their AI, like, let's talk about Meta building, entire fields of AI computing warehouses.
Yeah.
So they're changing the entire infrastructure of the world. So they want to bet on the market. Not only can they bet on it with the best information, but then they can go influence people to be successful on that information. Everybody go to Target and buy from Target because we just invested in them. So this is all completely under the table.
Yeah.
Well, you can have, what you're looking at is absolute control and power.
Wow. Yeah.
And you're seeing, and what I'll go back to bring it back to kids, it's starting because the most vulnerable are children. So who are getting hurt the most is them. We should, if you don't care about kids, care about yourself and your own job and your own future then, and be selfish and care about yourself to fix the problem, because it's going to get to you eventually and probably sooner than later. And I'll just say one other thing. I meet with a team of guys that work in special operations, and we talk about this stuff just as a group together because they have a whole different way of looking at it. And one of them came out and said he's very involved in well, I can't actually say, but I'll just say this. He said, we have experience with this technology to destabilize countries. And if I asked him, well, what's the most dangerous weapon you could go to battle with? And he's like, and I was kind of being a bit of a nerd, like, was it, this gun or this thing or, whatever. And he's like, dude, it's a smartphone. I could do far more damage with a smartphone and get what I want through that technology. And so zooming out to a societal level and recognizing what this is, the symptoms, it's like the thermometer in the mouth is kids. And we're seeing that our countries and our societies are sick with technology, and we need to make adjustments really fast. And I am standing on the front lines with kids, and you're standing on the front lines with kids and saying, we will die on this mountain to say we're going to protect them, and history will write the story. And at least I know I'm going to be on the good team and get this, move this ball forward.
Yeah.
But if you're selfish and you're a politician, just know it's coming for you, and it's coming for your job, and it's coming for the way everything works in your mind right now is controlled by a few people that have the information and have the ability to make sense of that information through AI. Look what they're doing with AI regulation. So I think companies know that the moneymaker they have is AI. And they will do anything and everything to make sure that doesn't get regulated. And they also are going to do anything and everything to make sure that there's no transparency. So the worst case scenario they could experience is somebody to say, you need to pop the hood on this engine and tell us what you're doing. I had somebody who was applying for a job that came to one of our roundtables in DC that we host with youth and national leaders. And they said that if you want to apply for a major programming role in Silicon Valley, they require a master's degree in human cognition and psychology, and then a programmer. So like they're looking for clearly somebody who's going to hack the brain and know how to do that. And programming is a secondary to understanding how the brain works. So if you're looking at what Donald Trump and JD Vance are doing, and you want to know if they're interested in protecting our kids' futures, and this is, for me, it's like, okay, let's see what they're going to do. I think there's great potential for them to make a huge impact here and align with families and be the leaders that actually are saying we stand with families on this issue and go down in history for protecting and saving hundreds of millions of lives and damages and all these things. And it's going to be based on how they regulate AI. I'm convinced of that.
Okay.
They're doing a smoke and mirrors oftentimes at one side because they're very happy to keep the issues pushed on a certain thing because they don't want you looking into what's actually happening with how they're using this technology. So they're capable of making money off of this technology, off of your children's attention far more than advertising. their potential to use that data for a whole bunch of other methods in the markets and other areas in business and venture capital is so crazy on this end, but they can only do it through AI technology, and they can only do it with the methods that they gather the data on your children.
Yeah.
And so they're going, and now they're flipping over and saying, oh, we're not worried about, free, like we're not worried about the free speech issues any, more, and, making sure that people are following a certain narrative. It's like, let's, we'll pull all that back. That's not an issue, because now it's like, that's not going to work anymore. So they need to find the new distraction.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sticking to the core. Where's the money coming from, and how are they getting it?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's very clear that children are getting harmed by these companies for profit, but where do their responsibilities lie when it comes to this? So some people will comment, parents' job, like parents should do better, when a kid gets harmed. And some people say we have an impossible job because it's built addictive to kids and not safe, but they can't stay away from it. So where do you land on that?
Well, so there's the upstream and the downstream you're talking about. So the downstream is like you have a company that's dumped sludge into the water, nuclear waste. And then parents are downstream and they're like, okay, we're going to die if we don't drink water. So we need to teach our kids, how do we drink this? We got to filter it and run it through all this process so you don't get poisoned.
Okay.
There comes a point where that's impossible. The water is just too toxic. I think we're at that point.
Okay.
I think it's at the point where if you give your kid a smartphone, it's so toxic and so damaging that the odds of something bad happening is just so in favor, like so against the parents and stacked against the parents. The other thing is technology is shifting and changing so quickly, and the way it's interacting with our kids, it's you're in a competition against somebody who's so far above your weight class that you might be able to fight above your, they call it fight above your weight class or your belt. And, but eventually it's going to KO you and your family. And so we need to stand in now. Like, I think we have a very unique time and space here where AI is in its baby, like this. I know it doesn't sound like it, but it's actually in its baby years.
Yeah.
And the way it's going to interact with our kids, like if we don't decide how technology is a part of our lives now and our families' lives, and hold our politicians responsible. Like, don't give politicians votes unless they have a clear statement of what they're doing and where they're going after with technology. And so the Kids Online Safety Act, we were really involved in that for years. And tried to offer a lot of support, had our kids informed about it, speaking about it. And $90 million was pumped into lobby work to shut that down. One of the things that the Kids Online Safety Act did outside of the duty of care that was phenomenal. But in the drafts that I read, it was talking about giving parents the ability to turn off AI in the background, to turn the internet into a library where you can find the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's your choice. It's not shoved in your face like a book flying off a library shelf, opening up to page 152 and smearing it in your kid's eyes. So that was a really powerful piece of legislation that got shut down for completely illegitimate reasons. And it was people that said they were for it and wanted to make a stand for the family. And at the end of the day, you look at all the things happening in between, certain senators and congressmen that were benefiting by what tech was doing, like certain congressmen that were benefiting from where they were building their new AI warehouses in their states. So we got to wake up, and parents need to say enough is enough and rally together around this and say, this is not the future that we want to leave behind. This is not the legacy that we have for our kids.
And move past the thought that this just is how it is. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to teach our kids the best we can, and they're going to get access to it anyway. So it is what it is. So how can parents that are listening advocate within their states or federally for safer online experiences for their kids?
I think we have to get back to grassroots. Like, our politicians, their job is to listen to their constituents. Their job is to make their office available for you to come, their phone lines open for you to call, to read the mail coming in. So I think that's one, is just getting civically involved again, being a part of the process. And I think, growing up as a 90s kid, I have to say there was a little bit of this feeling growing up. And I don't know if it was just the area I grew up in, but it's almost too big for me to be a part of. And what I'm realizing in my, little bit later years in life, that, living that American dream and part of being an American citizen and supporting the future of this country is to be involved in the process. And just realizing that the pages of history are writing themselves today. And this is something that I truly believe is a critical point is our kids' voices are so powerful
Mhm.
and parent voices are so powerful. So if I go to DC as an organizational leader, my voice is nothing in comparison with a youth that goes to DC to tell the truth.
Yeah.
My voice is nothing in comparison with a parent that goes to DC to go into their congressman or senator's office and say, why are you not doing something about this?
Mhm.
It makes a huge difference. And I'll give you one story. We were invited to a White House task force last year, invited us to come to a meeting where they had gathered at the White House EEOB. They had gathered all these amazing academics from across the country and flew them in. And they asked
Mhm.
Wired Human, one of our youth, to come and be a part of the panel. And they were all speaking, and very smart people
Mhm.
sharing about the research they're doing. And one of them made a statement that said, hey, we really shouldn't be using the word addiction because it's too stigmatizing to youth. And the youth that I had there, her name was Kayla. And
Mhm.
Kayla is a high school student. She's a powerhouse, a quiet, like, she's sort of this quieter personality, but when she speaks, the room stops and listens.
Mhm.
And she spoke so articulately and said, we really need to actually realize that this generation is addicted. That is not a stigmatizing word, that I could point to all my friends and my entire generation and tell you that addiction and smartphone use go hand in hand, and we
Mhm.
can't dance around it or try to use soft language around this. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
I saw Surgeon General Vivek Murthy look up for the first time, pull out his pen and start taking notes.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and had the opportunity, because of what she said, that we went and spoke to him. And he was so warm and kind. He grabbed my arm and pulled me in and wouldn't let me go and just wanted to hear. And so we shared the stories of the youth, because we were out there for the Judiciary Committee hearings on January 31st, and shared the stories and gave him all the testimonies and information.
Mhm.
And a couple months later, he wrote in the New York Times his determination to put warning labels on social media and similar in the similar context that they did for cigarettes, and then mentioned Wired Humans Youth Coalition. And
Amazing.
I can't take credit, or
Yeah.
Kayla can't take credit for the whole thing, because it takes 1,000 pushes to get it to go over. But
Yeah.
in that moment,
Yeah.
one youth voice was a lioness,
Mhm.
and roared that everybody paid attention. And I have seen that youth voice do that time. And Harrison Haynes is one of those youth voices that we met and went to Cupertino, California with the Heat Initiative. I know you've
Mhm.
had Sarah Gardner on your show and Harrison Haynes a number of times.
Yeah.
And he's a great representation of a youth voice that gets out there and is a truth teller
Yeah.
and is moving mountains, shifting systems, and
Mhm.
changing the discussion. So in your family, recognizing your kids, actually their voices are, kids are not to be, it's that whole saying, seen but not heard. But
Mhm.
actually in this issue, they're the experts on technology, in the sense that their generation is the one that's
Mhm.
most impacted by that.
Yeah.
And when they come up as the truth tellers, they literally are moving mountains in this. And I think if we
Mhm.
keep mobilizing and giving them that space to speak and giving them the platform to tell the truth, and get the Harrisons out there and get the Kaylas out there.
Mhm.
And one last story, sorry.
Yeah.
There
No,
was
it's
a
okay.
fifth grader. We're on our way back, and I get a picture that a teacher sent me that was accompanying him on this trip. And they actually spoke, and he saw a congressman sitting on the way back to Nashville on his flight. He got his information together about Section 230 and about the Kids Online Safety Act. I mean, they've all been trained. They've all know what they're doing. They were preparing for this. And
Mhm.
on his own accord, goes up to him, gets his attention, and starts telling him why they need to make a difference on Capitol Hill for his generation. And I'm telling you, it gives me goosebumps every time.
Yeah.
He's the last slide I do at every presentation, because I'm like, if a fifth grader has that ability to make that impact,
Mhm.
what if we change the narrative and flip this on its head?
Mhm.
What if, instead of a generation that's a lost cause because of technology, what if we are raising up the greatest generation that ever lived, that ever existed?
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing these youth do is, in order to rise above this and take authority over this and have a command in this, that you have to rise up and grow up to the next level. You have to get
I
got
hate
some
those
bubbles
things.
in the background.
Yeah. AI.
You have to get up there,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to have the ability to be able to speak your voice and share with an authority that says, I know who I am,
Mhm.
I know where I'm going, and I know what my values are in life, and I know what I'm about.
Yeah.
And these kids, they're doing that, and they're setting an entirely new narrative on Capitol Hill, in the state legislatures, and in their local communities about change. And so that's where that's where I'm anchored is in this generation, and seeing them as a major part of the solution, as well as the parents. I think they, in a very equally way, have a very similar authority to speak on this. It's not the politicians, it's not the organizational leaders or the influencers, it's them.
Yeah. God, that we can empower them if parents start educating them young on how this all works and how they're products to these companies and what these companies think about them, and that they're all part of a bottom line. I think all these conversations can start pretty young. And what data are we giving up when we sign up for these apps, even to play a game? And what is that company doing with this data? And I mean, it takes there's such good education happening back and forth. And I really hope that parents will start to have advocacy conversations within their families, whether that's, what can I do, right? If you're struggling with something in your home that seems impossible and it has to do with tech and it's affecting your kid and you, it's not your fault. It's a bigger problem. And if you don't speak up about it and try to make change or influence change, it's going to keep being that way. But also, I think, relieves us a little bit of that burden and guilt, because it's not our fault that our kids are all becoming addicted, or we're even addicted to these platforms.
Thank you. Yes.
Right. So for parents that are listening, who should they be contacting to be most effective with these messages?
I think you start in your local community. So I think it's great, like what I mentioned before about the political leaders and your congressman and civically engaged is 100% correct.
Yeah.
But start with your school boards, start with your local school community, get informed on the topic, and ask if you can share with your child's class about what's going on. Look for opportunities to host events or make these things a discussion topic in your local community. And I think here's something that you said that was so powerful. It's not your fault. And I want to really voice that message. And I'm not trying to take responsibility away. We all make mistakes. We're all just trying to, get by and do the best we can.
Yeah.
But here's something that the tech industry won't tell you is you're in an absolute war zone as a parent today. And the devastating thing about this hidden war zone, right? It's an unseen world that is so damaging and so destructive and is deciding the course of history, but yet it's so underneath the stream of what we're able to see at times that we feel responsible. And something that I want to say about a predator that they do as a strategy to silence their victims is that they blame them for the abuse. They say, "Oh, you wanted this. Oh, I saw the physical reaction you had. That's a sign that you liked it. Oh, you were the one that did that, so I had to respond that way." And they guilt their victim into thinking that they were complicit. And I think the tech industry really has a similar narrative. It's like, well, it's the parent's fault. It's a similar thing to say as a car manufacturer, hey, why should we put seatbelts or airbags or any safety features in the car? At the end of the day, the parents driving the car, they get an accident, take responsibility and learn to drive better. So it's a similar argumentation. So I love what you said, coming out and being like, hey, it's actually not our fault. There is a system in place that is designed at a fundamental level to make you and your family unsuccessful for their own personal gain. And so I think if we came together as a local community and recognize that we all have the same stories. We have tons of people in our communities that probably would come out and say, hey, we were sextorted, or my child was exposed to this, or this did go on, and it's not discriminatory. I don't care how rich you are or how high up on the social food chain you are or where you live in your community and what social class. I'll guarantee everybody's dealing with very similar problems as parents with kids with very similar stories. I've seen it in every context.
Amazing, Jason. Okay. Anything else you want to share with parents today before we start to close out?
Parents are the unsung heroes. I think it's one of the toughest jobs with the greatest responsibility and the greatest impact on society. It is the history that you leave behind, and our children are the legacy that will be the change the world needs. And so it is a huge undertaking. And there is a battle over your kids. There's a battle over making sure that you're unsuccessful in that journey because some other people want to write that narrative. And so I just want to release hope to recognize that you are powerful. Your kids are powerful. You do have a voice. This is not a monster that can't be defeated. We just have to recognize what we're swinging at. Nobody wants to get punched against an invisible enemy. It's pretty scary, but once we can pull the sheet off the enemy and realize what we're swinging at, then we know what to go for. And I hope this podcast, this episode shares what we're punching at and what we need to go after.
Yeah.
I have a whole thing in our book that my wife and I created called the RUM model, and it's called Relationship, Understanding, Mentorship, and Boundaries. To dive into that in depth, maybe there's another podcast episode in the future.
Yeah.
But it's essentially, how do we develop the next generation of high-level leaders capable of overcoming these crazy challenges with a total next level approach to how they do values in life and how they're overcoming these significant obstacles. And so it's basically relationship, defining what the relationship is in the family with our kids and how we do that relationship well. Relationship always builds the foundation for understanding, and understanding is not knowing just what the tech is out there, understanding the AI and all the stuff in between that we probably could share with our kids. It's understanding what the fundamental need is being met by that technology.
Sure.
So if your kid's on video games and is addicted to video games, it's being used as a tool to complete a job. What are they trying to get out of that? And when you go and be like, hey, this is an awesome video game in the sense that it looks wildly entertaining. It's crazy. Can I sit down and check it out with you? And I can really see why you get why this is interesting. Whatever it is, and be like, but it seems that you're getting like your significance or your level of value out of it. Like you're a level 99 and everybody respects you. Do you not feel respected at school or in your life? And opening up those doors of been saying like what you said, can we find a way to fill that fundamental human need in another aspect of life that actually leaves you with something when the video system or the video games are turned off?
Right.
Sex is a great example of that. Instead of shaming our kids if you catch them on a porn site, what if you talk about how beautiful sex is and be like, hey, that's a fundamental human need that's extremely important. And in the right context, in the right relationship, in the right path, it's one of the most beautiful things human beings can experience in a healthy relationship. It's also equally the most damaging thing that a human being can do to another human being in the wrong context, in the wrong type of setting, and the same thing online. And so that ultimately takes shame out of the conversation. And now when you've established the relationship, there's no shame. You've met them in their needs. Then you start mentorship, and that's when you can start talking about why we want to head in this direction of what are our values and who am I and where do I want to go with my life, and how do I reflect on my inner core. Like there's a whole stuff I could go down, but the ultimate goal is that then you hit on boundaries. That's just the last one. And boundaries is where every parent usually starts, or we all try to start, like, don't do this and here's all the rules. But rules are just made to be broken if they don't know the why. And so hopefully at that journey of mentorship, the why is so determined and understood that boundaries are simply saying yes to what I want with my life. So that's what we do with our youth coalition. So the youth that are coming out of this, they know who they are, what they're about, and where they're going, and they know what their yes is. And so I think if we could raise a generation up, starting in the family, in our local communities, that know what they're after in life, and I think we have a shot at actually kicking the big tech industry, kicking its butt, and redefining the relationship with how we move forward as a community together on this topic.
I love that. And we have hope. Like we have more information than ever before. We can see through the screen a little bit on what they're doing and what their motives are. And I love that we can't just set boundaries without explaining to them why. And I think that parents are more educated than ever, and we're starting to educate our kids on what's actually happening at younger ages. And that will move through and spur on that advocacy as they get older, to say, this doesn't make me feel good, and I know what you're doing, and so I'm going to do something about it, right? I'm going to include links to wiredhuman.org, right?
Yeah.
And
that's great.
And also, I assume your book, The Glass Between Us, is available on there. But is there anywhere else that listeners can connect with you or Wired Human?
Yeah, if you want to get the book is on Amazon too as well. Just write in The Glass Between Us, maybe Jason Frost. It'll pop up right away.
Okay.
That's a great place to start. We do like horrible at social media. We do have like an Instagram account, but yeah, we're not super active on it. I think we go through seasons where we're going to get great information out there, and then I'm like, I hate Instagram, and it's just depressing to try to navigate.
I know.
But yeah, the website, I think ultimately, like, my vision of being here is to be accessible. So if you're a parent, or a school leader or somebody in your community, looking at the resources and tools that you have within your own sphere of influence,
Mm-hmm.
and then feel free to reach out and ask me, like, how can I supercharge that? How can I be a piece to help you be the best version of advocacy in your community that you can be?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a stepping stone for kids to be able to advocate, for others to find how they want to advocate in their local communities. And if it makes sense, please reach out to me at jason@wiredhuman.org. Check out our website. We're here to help. We're here to support you on your journey of advocacy and supporting your family.
Thank you, Jason. You are a wealth of information. I have a feeling we're going to have more conversations because I feel like, scratched the surface on all these things. And so I really, really appreciate you being here. I know parents got a lot from you so far. And again, we'll chat again. And thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Nicki. And it was a pleasure, and you're really fun to talk to. You make it so easy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's so nice.